If you were thrown over the ocean, how long would you last? It's a 38-day survival at sea, a film based on a true story. In the dangerous waters of the South Pacific, three men without any food or fresh water. All they have is a yellow life raft. 3 squares in size. They are attacked by sharks and exposed to the sun. Against all odds, they have to escape from the endless sea. On January 16, 1942, 3 soldiers who were strangers to each other set off on a reconnaissance mission in a plane, but lost their way during the flight. They ran out of fuel. The 3 men had to make an emergency landing. While crashing into the sea, they rushed to gather as much usable material as they could from the plane, then laid out a life raft and they climbed up with great difficulty. The 3 men got to know each other briefly, but the cold sea had frozen them to the bone. They had to squeeze into the small raft and wait for help. At first they were optimistic. The bombardier and the communicator pretended to play a game of coffee, as if they were on holiday. They thought that someone would soon come to rescue them, but it wasn't as rosy as they had imagined. When the rescue plane arrived, they realized that there were no flares or a glowing object in the vast expanse of the ocean. They were so small. Despite their desperate attempts to shout, they watched as the rescue plane flew away. Their only hope was dashed. The captain told the 2 men in all seriousness that there will be no more rescues. It was our battle with the sea that was to follow, and it's going to be a tough battle. Everything from here on is in my hands. They then pulled out everything they could find on their bodies, but they only found a few knives and ropes. There were very few items that could be used. There was no food, no water, no maps, not even an oar to row the boat. In order to lighten the load on the life raft, the captain ordered the loss of the shoes. They had to reluctantly throw their shoes into the sea, but the captain put his own shoes in the corner. He said, "If we get to land, one of us has to walk to get help." By nightfall, the 3 men took turns on duty. The captain was so thirsty that he took a glass of home-brewed syrup in his leather shoe. He then drank it down. The next day, he wakes up. The 2 men pretend to drink their coffee as usual. The captain used a woolly thread to find out which way the wind was blowing, as they had not eaten for a long time. The faces of the 3 men were already slightly pale, so they decided to settle for food. You've never seen fishing like this before. They use braided rope as fishing line. The spring in the magazine is polished into a hook. The 2 are held together. Then they use a piece of rag as bait. That's probably what it takes to catch a fish. But the next moment, a fish is actually hooked. But the fish here seem even hungrier than they are. They bite the hooks right off. But in order to survive, they don't give up. They start a second attempt. The captain understands that this is no way to catch fish, but he doesn't warn them. It was the 2 young men's hope for survival. 5 days had passed. The 3 of them had nothing to eat or drink. They could hardly even pretend to drink coffee now. Looking at the sea water close at hand, the correspondent couldn't hold back any longer. He picked up some seawater to quench his thirst, but the captain stopped him in time, because he would only get thirstier. As they were about to fall into despair, the captain suddenly shouted in excitement, and took a pencil out of his pocket. For with this pencil, he could work out exactly where they were now. Soon, Airport had drawn a map of the sea from memory. The 2 young men, who had been desperate for a while, saw hope again. Then they made a simple sea anchor out of rope and life jackets to keep their bearings, and that was it. They set off for land, but after 5 days without water they began to pray to God for a heavy rain. Perhaps their sincerity had touched the heavens. A heavy rain fell during the night. The 3 of them drank as much as they could. Then they began to collect the rainwater. On the 7th day of rafting, the problem of water was solved, but they had not eaten anything for 7 days. At this point, the bombardier could no longer bear the hunger. He pulled out his knife and tried to stick a fish in the sea to satisfy his hunger. The captain told him to stop. If he hit the life raft, they would all be dead. But he didn't listen, and that's when it was then that the surprise came. In a panic, he catches a juvenile shark. After a good meal, they put the rest of the shark meat in a sock and stored it. The captain told them they would have enough food to last them for the next few days. After they had eaten and drunk enough, the atmosphere was much lighter. The correspondent said that if they survived, he would introduce his sister to the bombardier. As the correspondent was describing his sister's appearance, something unexpected happened. The smell of blood on the raft had attracted a large school of sharks. The 3 men did not dare to make a move, so they fought the sharks off for a long time. The sharks slowly retreated. By nightfall, they let their guard down, just as the bombardier was about to wash his hands. But suddenly one of his hands was bitten by the shark. Fortunately, He was able to react quickly. He reacted quickly and was not dragged into the water. In the days to come, they became more cautious, too, but the sharks still appear from time to time. Time passed. They had been drifting in the sea for 15 days. The food they had saved before had been exhausted. At that moment the bombardier, who could not stand his hunger, raised his pistol and pointed it at the captain, who was sleeping. The 3 soldiers had been at sea for 15 days without food or water. Having been adrift at sea for 15 days, a strong feeling of hunger came over them again. At that moment, a seabird landed next to the captain. The commander raised his gun and pointed it at him. He then pulled the trigger. The captain, awakened by the shot, reacted quickly. He immediately went to catch it. But just as the prey was in hand, a shark came towards them in the distance. But despite this, the captain did not want to leave the seabirds behind. He swam as hard as he could towards the raft. The shark was close behind.